All right, so welcome to the Board Assistant Briefing Meeting, and Wayne is here. So the first item on the agenda is a review of the board meeting for next week. And I know we normally start at the end, but because Derek and I think Wayne have to leave very soon, if it's okay with everyone, we're going to just start with one particular item on page 4, item 6. So Derek can get on his way. So Derek, you want to?
Sure. So at the admin committee meeting last month, well, actually, let me go back. We issued an RFP for SCAQMD High School Air Quality Outreach Program, educational program. We received 7 responses. Of the 7, 4 firms were interviewed. They were deemed responsive and qualified, and or more qualified than others. And so admin committee forwarded their recommendation to the full board. I'm here to answer your questions.
Questions for Derek? None? Mark? No?
I guess.
Okay, Dan?
Do we know, I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to review it. Do we know yet where which schools it's going to go to or how those are going to be selected?
Sure, so it's going to be up to 100 schools, and they're going to be spread out throughout 4 counties, but they're going to be focused in environmental justice communities.
If Derek has to bail, and just a quick comment, SB 732, our air authority thing was amended yesterday, so the language was posted. So if you're interested in the taxing authority bill, the full language is now up. So
it's not a tax authority bill,
it's a voting district authorization.
Voting district authorization.
That recognizes
I will
that we
recognize
would have that authority.
I will try to memorize that.
Thank you.
Okay, so no more questions for Derek. Is that your only item, Derek?
I got standard reports, but
Okay, I'll handle that. All right, so then we'll go back to kind of the normal order of business. So the public hearing on page 7. This is Rule 1134. So it's a BART rule that for all facilities, but also mostly because of the reclaim transition. It's for stationary gas turbines that are not at power plants, which we already passed 1135 for, and that are not at some POTWs or landfills, because those are going to be another rule, but everywhere else. And it's a pretty significant landing rule. It's about 2.8 tons per day of NOx emission reductions, which is a significant part of the reclaim overall emissions. Most of the discussion has been with the gas company on some of their unique situations with compressor turbines. And we've, at this point, included some provisions to perhaps allow them another time, a little bit more time if needed, recognizing their unique situation, and in many cases getting additional emission reductions by allowing enough time for replacement rather than retrofit. So Mike Morris is here, the manager in charge. Does anyone have any? We don't have a lot of specific opposition at the moment. We do have kind of the general reclaim comment letters coming in about doing the whole, doing all the BART rules at once, or doing the whole transition at once, or some of the other, very similar to the comments we've got on some of the other BART landing rules that we've worked on. Any questions on that?
This is probably a pretty stupid question, but when you say NOx, are you talking about NO2 only, or are you talking about NO2 and NO?
Both.
Both. So the NO2 is the one that creates, I mean, again, this is simplistic and maybe a stupid question, but NO2 is the one that creates the ozone.
It's the ratio of NO2 to NO that is a factor in ozone formation, actually. It's a ratio.
Right.
But NOx is a very good indicator of ozone formation.
And NO tends to suppress.
What?
NO tends to suppress.
Fresh NOx emissions that include more NO than NO2 can suppress it very locally, like if you're at a freeway location. Any other questions on this rule? Okay. Mike, anything you want to add?
No.
All right, so we'll go back to,
Public comment?
we're going to do public comment at the end of item 1, or?
Yeah, so the entire, Harvey, the entire board agenda is the item. So if you wanted to do all of your public comment now, you could do that, or you could wait until the end of until we go through the entire agenda.
So 1 through 15?
No, it's the entire board agenda. So if you,
Maybe what page are we on, what are we talking about?
right now, we're on page 7 of the agenda and of the governing board agenda, and the agenda for the board assistance briefing lists review of agenda for April 5th, 2019 board meeting as the first item. So if you'd rather do your public comment now, you can do that. If you'd rather wait until the end, you can do that as well.
Doesn't we just talk Knox stations of 1134 or so how much, I could either do it here or wait till, how many items?
Let's wait.
Yeah, we'll call it the end. That'll make it. What's the second?
Okay, so we're back on page 2. First item on page 2 is the minutes of the board meeting, which I know you don't have. Any comments on that? The next item is the budget, setting the public hearing for budget. It's not being adopted, but we're setting the public hearing for budget in May, and doing that in April. So a lot of the activity around the budget is happening this month with the budget committee and workshops. We've had 1 public consultation meeting last week. Sujata, if there's any questions about the budget, Sujata's here. I will mention that there is probably 1 significant fee change that we're proposing that has to do with toxic emissions fees. So we're proposing a restructuring of the way that we collect toxic emission fees to better match our activities and expenditures. And over the next 3 years, there would be an increase, approximately $4.5 million of additional revenue from this 3-year increase on toxic emission fees. If you're interested, I can go in a little more detail, but all the other workshops and committees this month are also going to be diving in. So this is just setting hearing, but I'm happy to discuss that, or if there's general budget questions, Sujata.
What's the current base of that fee, that 4.5?
Currently on toxic emission fees, we only collect about $500,000.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this will bring it up to close to $5 million, which better aligns with the work that we do on our toxics program.
So just on the, go ahead. Just on the general fee, we did that catch up a few years ago. Is this the 3rd year of that big catch up and that?
This is the
for the
3rd
general
year
fees.
of the permitting fees.
Okay.
This is the 3rd year of that. So actually the increase in this toxics fee, we're not proposing for this coming year. We're proposing for the year after.
Okay. This is the whole, the toxics fee is a separate thing from the
Separate.
permit catch up we did.
Yeah.
What was it, 15, 20%, something? I don't remember.
It
It
was,
was phased in over 3 years, so
12%.
one was Title V and the other one was non-Title V. This will be the last year of Title V,
Okay.
which is 10.66. So, and non-Title V fees, no more.
Okay.
Done.
so
Okay, so was it like 30%?
It was 30%, and then the non-Title was about 8%.
Okay.
So for the toxics fees, we're proposing in the coming year just the restructuring, but keeping it revenue neutral, because his other fees are coming. And then in the subsequent 2 years, 50%, 100% of this increase. So there could be some changes to individual facilities fees in the coming year, although we're not collecting any more revenue. We're just trying to get people used to the new structure.
I think it's fair to say that we anticipate that the reporting will become much more accurate in terms of what we're seeing now. And so that'll help people save money. They're not as due diligent as they perhaps should be.
The toxic emission fees now are quite low, so people report with defaults, and there's not a lot of impact, and we audit where we can, but we can't capture everything. But now that there's going to be more of an implication, we think that even though we're projecting, based on current reporting, 4.5 million increased revenue, when people start diving in, now that there's more implications, that might be more source tests, more scrutiny of the emission factors they're using, and perhaps, it might be a little less than that, but that just means probably more accurate data as well. So.
Okay, so both monitoring, testing, and then.
There's no extra requirements at this point for doing source testing, but there's kind of a hierarchy of how you report. Like there's default factors, and then there's.
We produce this much material, ergo
Yeah.
we have this much emissions.
Right. But typically, if you think those default factors are too high, you always have the option to test, and that could save you money in the long run, perhaps.
So it's tenfold what they're currently paying, if I do my math.
So that we have emissions fees as a whole. So we have criteria pollutant emission fees, and we have toxics emission fees. So right now we get about 20 million a year in criteria pollutant fees, and only $500,000 in toxics fees. But so the total emission fees is only going to go up by 20%, 25%. But the toxics fees themselves, if you just narrow in on that, it'll go up more. But we spend a lot of our time, not just in emissions reporting, but throughout all our toxics programs and it's increasing with every day, and AB 617 and other things as well.
And how many entities pay the fee, the toxics fee?
Yeah.
Number of entities paying the toxics fee.
It's about 2,000 right now in our system. And one thing we want to do is, because first of all we're phasing it, the increase really doesn't hit until the second year, but also we're trying to reach out and have telling facilities they can call us. We have all the data of what the impact will be on you based on your past reporting, so we can work through that. We can give advice, and hey, if you're being driven by this pollutant, it's a default factor, maybe you want to do some testing, or we'll work with facilities.
So quick question, not going through a budget cycle you had before, that fee, are we trying to meet a cost recovery, or are we exceeding cost recovery for our services, or fill me in on that type of background there?
It is for cost recovery. We are subject to Prop 26, so the package will include the whole justification for the programs that we have.
But even at the rate that we're proposing, it's not full recovery.
So that's the key, I guess that's the key what I was looking for, where are we at currently compared to where we will end up being? I just don't have the historical knowledge. So.
Yeah, I think it's fair to also understand some of the pressures that we have from the legislature. So during the whole 617 process, there was a perception by the legislature that the local air districts should be raising their fees a lot more to cover a lot of those local expenses. And we had just talked about the increases that we had just done, and we had actually talked with EPA about sort of how we structure our fees and how we think we can offset those. This is sort of neutral ground. We're not getting full cost recovery, but it's something that we can also show to the legislature that we are doing everything that we can and not simply just going and trying to tap out the GGRF funds.
Thank you.
Do we expect a significant expansion of the number of facilities having to report?
Not through the rule our fee rule. However, CARB is working on a statewide reporting rule that is not final yet, but could bring in a lot more facilities, including our facilities, and they would probably be reporting to us as well. So one of the aspects of, most of those are smaller facilities because we already capture the larger facilities with our thresholds, but we are putting in, it's a different structure, but one of the structures, one tier is a flat fee for reporting. It's like, at the end of the day, at the end of the 3 years, it'll be like $75 or so. To capture that and the work that will entail to have more facilities report, but if the emissions are low, as they likely are, it's not gonna be that much more than
Well,
that.
this of course is stationary sources, but what about the mobile sector? And CARB has some authority over truck emissions, I guess. Any thought of them levying some toxic fee on truck fleets? Being
Our
like a
authority
major
on the mobile
source of-
sources and fees is limited, but I don't know if
I don't-
Bay wants to weigh in on that. I don't think,
I was just asking if CARB's considering.
yeah,
I'm not aware of CARB doing that.
not within this toxics reporting rule, as of yet, that I have heard, right? Not what they.
Yeah, I would think a lot of the EJ communities are seriously impacted by diesel emissions going through their area.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, so in the AB 617 process, we are, we're pushing CARB to make commitments on mobile sources within each of the plans and the program as a whole.
Okay.
So any other questions on that fee increase or the budget in general?
For the permit fees, we're on Title V and non-Title V. We've just gone through this process, which was supposed to allow full cost recovery. That was the EPA issue. The estimate 3 years ago was that this would enable us to have full cost recovery, and is that going to be the case?
On the permit fees?
On the permit fees.
The short answer is yes. That's
Thank you.
the assumption and expectation. We are going to rerun the numbers, but we are doing well, at least from what we know from last year.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Other questions? Again, there's a lot of activity this month around with workshops, and after the board meeting, there's a budget workshop. Okay, on to page 3, if there's no more questions, on page 2. So this is 1106. This is marine and pleasure craft coatings and pleasure craft coating operations, which have some overlap. So we're proposing to kind of combine them into one rule for clarity and enforcement reasons. We had brought essentially this rule to the board 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago or so. The board did not pass it, but there was discussion that it should come back, and I know it's been a long time, but it still needs to be done for various reasons, including some EPA, consistency with some EPA, RACT and control technology requirements that we're supposed to have as part of the SIP. So we are bringing it back. The biggest issue has been, again, the energy curable coatings and RADTEC's comments. We brought this to stationary, and we got some feedback, so we're working very closely with Rita to try to include some of her requests within the rule. I'm sure we'll hear from her. So we're trying to work through those issues. A lot of it involves a potential exemption for coatings with a certain level of grams per liter of VOC. So we're working through that. We think this is just setting hearing, but we're optimistic we can resolve those issues. So I don't know if we want to wait till the end.
We said we'll wait till the end, and Harvey had stepped out, so let's just go to the end, and then at the end, everybody will have their 3 minutes.
Okay. So any questions on
emission reductions are we talking about on this?
This is more clarification, so we're not achieving significant emission reductions from actual emissions today, but there are some limits we have to get in place in a rule to satisfy EPA, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get a lot of emission reductions for it, because of the amount of usage is really minor. So so it's not necessarily that we're doing this for emission reductions, we're doing it to make sure there's clarity and ease of enforcement.
Okay.
So I've got a couple questions on this. Every time the district passes a rule, the rule is supposed to reflect BART. And I looked at the staff report, and the only mention of BART is the incremental cost effectiveness, which is part of the BART analysis. And the staff report says that The district did not have to do that analysis because the rule won't result in any emission reductions. This is a rule over 20 years old. When was the last time the district did a BART analysis in this category?
Well, we did it for 3.5 years ago when we brought it to the board and it didn't pass.
The language, I went back to the 2015 staff report, and the language is exactly the same. So it
So
didn't
you're
appear
looking
that a
for-
BART analysis had been done then either. The language here implies that a RAC analysis had been done, but no BART analysis. So there's a question, so maybe staff could get back to me with some clarification on that. Also, I got a call this morning from somebody who thought that the San Diego district actually had some more stringent limits. And I went back and I looked at San Diego's rule, and it looked like there are some limits which are more stringent in San Diego. So isn't the district required to look at those limits and pass the most, as part of a RAC analysis, not a BART analysis, if there are tougher limits elsewhere, aren't those required to be in the rule?
I believe so, but again, we did the RACT analysis, again, whether it's RACT or BART and where the gap lies for the 2016 AQMP in this category. So if you discovered something we either missed or something that was adopted since that analysis was done, then
Send it to us.
Send it to us.
Okay.
But
Well,
we looked again this time, we didn't find anything, but maybe there is something else.
The San Diego rule was adopted back in the 90s. So it's been going on for a while, and I just kind of randomly picked a few and looked at them, and some we were more stringent on. But others, like pre-treatment wash primer or wood sealer, seem to be less stringent. So if staff could look at that.
Yeah, okay.
The last question I had was regarding toxics, and there's a provision in the new rule which basically has some increased requirements related to toxics, but they only call out a few of the carcinogens. So the last question is really, why aren't we using our entire toxics list in looking at the formulations?
Okay, we'll look at it. It's likely based on what we found and what the concerns were, but we'll take a look at that as well.
Okay, great, thanks.
Just one question. In the committee meeting, it seemed, if I recall correctly on this rulemaking, that there was some question and debate going on about the test methods and whether or not they would actually, if they exist, to be able to prove the emissions. So how is industry supposed to know that they're complying? So has there been any progress on that dilemma?
We are trying to resolve that issue. The main issue is that for a small subset of a type of coating that, as far as we can tell, is not used in the basin or used extensively in this industry, thin film energy procurable coatings, there is a method, but the method requires knowing the formulation of the material a priori to the test. So from a pure compliance perspective, you can't go necessarily pick it off the shelf, bring it back to the lab, and do a test. We think we're working on a solution for that within the rule. We'll be talking, we're discussing that with RadTech right now, but we'll see. But it's a long, it can go on for a long time. It's been a long-going issue. There's no other test that can work that we have been able to find for years on how you can actually use this as a compliance tool. It can be used, it's perfectly valid to be used to label your product or for you to know what your VOC content is.
But none of
But I
the
think
sounds
the short answer is, we think there's a way forward. We'll be talking with Rita, and we'll be reporting back.
All right, Rita. Thank you.
But Mark, we'll look into some of those issues. Okay, any other questions on 1106? Keep that in mind for later when Rita comes back. All right, page 3, item 3. Naveen?
Yes, this project is for the development and demonstration of more fuel or more efficient natural gas engines and vehicles. And we're working with the Department of Energy and the California Energy Commission on these types of projects. Staff has selected 4 projects to cost share that are consistent with our air quality management plan. 2 of those are for more efficient engine technology, and 2 are for plug-in hybrid vehicles. And really the cost share is about, or the requested cost share is 1.7 million, which is about 6% of the total project cost for those 4 projects that I talked about. And I can answer any more detailed questions.
You said 6% of total cost?
About 6% of the total project cost.
So heavy duty hybrid?
These are all heavy duty hybrids or class 5 to class 8.
So, I mean, I haven't had a chance to dig into this on my own, and I will, but I just would love your take, since the supervisor, as you may recall, was showing some concern about, why are funds not going more into zero emissions technology. And I understand that near zero emissions technology is more commercially ready in certain classes than zero emissions technology is or will be in the foreseeable future. But I'm wondering if you could go, and I understand that especially to be the case in the very heavy, the class 8. But I'm wondering in some of the lower class categories that are being funded here, I can't recall them right off the top of my head, but if you could just maybe give any sort of summary, or we can do it offline too, if it's too cumbersome to do it now. I would love to have a sort of an industry, like a Cliff Notes industry comparison of where the ZEV industry is at now, hydrogen fuel cell, battery electric, or hybrid of the 2, versus NZE, so that I can explain to her a little more why, what the justification is for doing the zero emissions, over the zero emissions technology choices.
So you're correct. There are different stages of different technology. And if I can do a 30-second overview, light duty battery electric certainly is fully commercialized to a great degree, especially when you take plug-in hybrid electrics into account. Or heavier duty vehicles, the smaller class 3, class 4 vehicles are starting to see some penetration into the battery electric. Technology advancement demonstration staff continues to do parallel efforts for zero emission and near zero emission technologies, considering again the larger scalability potential. And all of these projects are from a national perspective. The Department of Energy is putting in majority of the funding, and we think that scalability will help accelerate that market penetration. But yeah, we can certainly have a longer discussion on technology readiness level for different class vehicles for near zero as well as for zero emission.
One question. Considering that it's 6% of the total cost, but it's I did a quick calculation. That means it's about $283 million project. It would go ahead with or without our money. So what is the inherent benefit to the district in putting in 6% of the total cost?
So again, that scalability and near-term market penetration of those technologies. For example, one of the projects is a local manufacturer, U.S. Hybrid, that we've done on earlier prototypes with. They've shown success with those prototypes, and now they want to commercialize this hybrid electric truck that will reduce emissions, obviously, and increase fuel economy by 50-60%. So that's one of the projects, for example, where we want to push that Class 8 truck into a commercialized aspect.
So you're saying that we can help the energy to tailor some of their programs to benefit some of our projects here?
So the 4 projects that staff is proposing for co-funding are all in line with our air quality management goals, and some of those are local manufacturers and some of those are national providers where the near zero emission technology availability will help push from a national scale perspective, which will then in turn also lower costs as well and get the same level of emission reductions. An additional benefit would be to further push the national standard that staff has proposed or SCAQMD has proposed for California as well as on a nationwide basis.
Any other questions for Naveen? All right, Naveen, you're gonna have number 4 also?
Sure. So the next item is to issue our request for proposal to solicit bids from local universities and colleges to offer up a scholarship for a graduate student that would help us with research and training, as well as students that can support workforce in the areas of air quality impacts, health impacts, and sustainability, and greenhouse gas reduction. So this is an item that we're just putting the RFP out, looking for feedback. Some of the requirements for the criteria in the request proposal is to have already established credit system where South Coast and other potential funders can help further develop that training program.
This was done in response to the board's request to broaden, to look at other universities and educational institutions.
So an endowment means you have to have a big chunk of change where you can take the investments or the interest to pay. So how much is that and where did it come from?
So what we had proposed previously was a $1 million endowment. Precedent for that was established at UC Riverside, where ARB had established an endowment as part of their move from El Monte to UC Riverside. We were also asked to provide that, the board approved that. The concept is to now look at additional universities and sort of establish that. UCI was a natural consideration, given the number of graduates that we have from the programs, given their leadership on fuel cells. National Fuel Cell Research Center is located at UCI. There's a number of areas where they have the Advanced Power and Energy Program. So that was why staff had made the original proposal for UCI, but again, the board wanted to look at other educational institutions, but I would expect that endowment would be at that 1 million level to help support the graduate level work that would be ongoing and part of, we hope, the priorities that we're looking at.
Any questions?
And the new ARB facilities coming along as I drive by every day on the way home. It's getting there slowly.
Pretty well.
Okay, some other questions on the page 4. Jason, number 5.
Good morning, everyone. As part of AB 617, staff has participated in multiple community steering group meetings to gather input on their local air quality concerns. And then based upon their input, as well as an assessment of the program, staff recommends to reallocate funds and realign expenditures that have been previously recognized by the board. Included recommended actions are to issue solicitations, execute contracts, and purchase orders for services and equipment that would be implemented in the 3-year plan communities of AB 617. And if you have any questions,
So how much money are we moving around?
So the total amount of money is about a little bit more than $1 million. We looked at 746 for equipment, and we've got 610 for services.
So about 1.3?
1.3.
Those would be for probably purple sensors or?
No, I mean, this is a combination of equipment and services. We have a multi-tiered strategy where sensors are a part of that strategy, but we use measurement tools appropriate for the types of information we're trying to gather. So some of the information, for example, sensors could provide are informational, educational, and we also have other advanced techniques that could give us better information as far as like either source attribution or compliance level type of information if we have to go to that.
Okay, any other questions for Jason? All right, so we already did number 6. Number 7, any, Sujata, want to just do this?
Yes, so this item is to remove fixed assets that have become obsolete or inoperable, and this is, we need board's approval, and we bring this item every year. And there is a list of equipments and another list for vehicles that we are showing in this board letter, and the total amount is about $885,845, and these are depreciated assets that are no longer in operation or not operating. I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions on that? Okay, number 8 is fairly routine. Anything convened on number 8?
I think it's just board letter itself,
Yeah.
standard approval of different contracts.
Okay. All right, so on the page.
I do have one question about that. I saw in the paper last week where you're talking about a program to getting people to Dodger and Angel Stadium through transit, buses and trains. Is this thing about Dodger Stadium, is that, would that spur that type of process?
So the MSRC has funded these kind of public events for quite some time, or major events. The MSRC action last month was to allow the Dodger and Metro program to continue on, considering that they do near zero emission buses as transport mechanism from, for example, Union Station to Dodger Stadium. As long as there is some public transport that's feeding these shuttle buses, if you want to call them.
Okay.
But the requirement is they must use near zero or zero emission buses for those types of transport. That's a shift in the MSRC decision.
And there's the train to Anaheim Stadium. We've been talking about doing Coachella.
Oh,
That's that's a little more challenging.
I unfortunately went down to Palm Springs once during one of those Coachella things. Took me 3 hours to get back home because of the traffic.
So this was a very, MSRC has $60-some-odd million to spend over the next 3 years, and this was one of the programs they decided to keep.
Good.
Also, Orange County does, during the fair, they do park and ride, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so on to page 5. Any questions on any of the received and file reports on page 5, 9 through 15? Mark?
14.
14.
And
yes.
It wasn't available, so.
Yeah, it just got finalized, like I saw this morning.
So what changes?
I don't have it with me. There are a couple rule shifts a little bit later. I don't have it all off the top of my head. Okay, for that, and I'll just be out, not today, tomorrow. Okay, on to page 6. Anything on the committee reports?
One thing, on item 18, AB 210, I believe they're talking about reducing emissions by 1 ton per day, and that was an expansion of the number, the years of, to expand the number of year models to be exempt. Now, I'm just wondering how they arrived at the 1 ton per day reduction, because it would be my sense that most of those cars are probably at best weekend cars going out and probably not doing all that much driving. And I'd just be curious at how they figured out it'd be 1 ton per day. I think it was 1 ton per day.
We can look into the
Yeah,
details.
I think we did look at the gap in the MVAC model, which predicts
Okay.
emissions between, what is it, 79 and 80 something, or whatever this would propose.
83.
Based on my recollection,
1983.
when these type of things come up, our opposition will have little impact on this bill. Because everyone loves classic cars.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I
one of the
can't think of a
reasons.
1982 classic car.
Well, but I mean, they're making that, there are some now that, you can spend a lot of money to get those old cars, but.
Yeah, so I think one reason staff recommended oppose and the committee, forwarded that on to the board was that, there was a natural breakpoint in technology with that original exemption.
Yeah.
But this one is just, it doesn't make as much sense, right? So.
And Supervisor Rutherford did ask if there was some reason for 1983, and we didn't know. As long as we're talking about ledge, I'm sorry I don't have the numbers, but there was a bill that required GGRF to also consider criteria pollutants along with GHGs.
Is that the Skinner bill?
I'm not sure. I saw him the other morning and I didn't write down the numbers. And then there was a bill for some kind of truck exchange, and I wonder if that's Member Robinson was kind of talking about. Anyway, that's just FYI. I'm sorry I don't have the numbers.
The second one I definitely know about. There's a lot of activity, so we can only take so many to the ledge committee. Speaking on behalf of Derek, he's got to leave. But there's only so many we can take, so we're trying to prioritize. We definitely, on that truck exchange, we're bringing to committee next 2 weeks from now.
Is that kind of along the lines of what Councilman Robinson's been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, we've all been talking about.
Instead of scrapping, move the clean truck to a.
I mean, we
district.
know that the 2010 model year trucks, even when it's required by CARB 2023 everywhere, is not clean enough for attainment.
Right.
So eventually incentives are going to go to start changing out 0.2 trucks, but those are pretty clean trucks
Right.
relative to some other trucks, especially in other states. So how do we monetize that instead of like scrapping trucks with useful life left in them? Otherwise it's going to cost everyone more. So the CARB has done it kind of on a case-by-case basis, approving some programs, but very limited, and some programs haven't gone very well. This would be a push to CARB to like, okay, let's make these programs work.
On SB 210, that would not apply to out-of-state registered trucks, right?
210 is light duty, isn't it?
Was it light duty?
Well, there's
No.
SB 210 and AB 210.
AB 210.
So the Leva bill.
SB 210. They make it confusing. Yeah, it would. I believe. No, this doesn't apply to out-of-state trucks. I believe this is for registration, right?
So it seems to me that we have a number of trucks running on our freeways now that basically are within state, but who are registered in Indiana or wherever. So this could result in more trucks getting registered in other states.
I was confused. So last year there was a bill that talked about in order to get your annual renewal of your truck, like you're going to have to be compliant with the CARB rule. But the CARB rule applies to not just trucks registered in California. The truck and bus rule applies to all trucks in California. So trucks that don't comply, in theory, are not supposed to come into the state.
Oh, you can't do that.
Well,
that goes against interstate commerce.
Well,
You're not gonna
the rule is in
say,
place.
oh, you can't come in here with all your goods.
The rule is in place. And so, but it's an enforcement challenge, obviously. This is a bill that helps with that enforcement challenge. Any other questions on page 6? All right, so that is the full agenda for the board meeting. We'll take public comment on item 1 on our agenda. Harvey, I know you have 2 cards in, but you have 3 minutes to cover anything you'd like.
Okay, this is the thing, okay. Harvey Etter, I'm speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition.
and like-minded folk. I want to incorporate by reference the February 8th Administrative Committee to the Board at 10 a.m., 51 minutes. I'm on with Dr. Burke and Wayne for about 19 minutes to 29 and 48 through 51. This discussed BARC, the best available retrofit control technology. I'm going to hit a really important point is that it's technology forcing. 2012 was the district's case against, they were sued by the coating manufacturers. The Supreme Court of the state of California said that if it's cost effective, if not right now, but in 1, 3, 5, 10, 20 years, when the rule is implemented, then it is technology forcing and has to be used in supplies to solar and has. And that's the law. Anyway, we had discussion on that and had support from Dr. Burke. And he said that he did not hear, he said what was put in the plan about this and that there was a paragraph here, a page there, but nobody really contested that media told solar conversion equitably is, life cycle cost effective, especially what's happened with Sunshot, stuff we brought on the records, and the Solar New Deal, about 40 exhibits in the 12 plan. So now there's the Green New Deal with Cortez and Markey back east. We're getting this to them. They don't know about this stuff. People don't. We're trying to get information requests. Also, we filed on natural gas plants and embarked and G 500 forms from 12 on. Got the Sierra Club to do this, and there are 3 plants. DWP that was done by Sunrise, and they said they're going to do solar, and we're trying to get a hold of contact people with them. Have been working with Koretz's staff, Andy, etc., and the Sunrise folks. Also with the Sierra Club, heading up a committee of the Sierra Club. Since we've already spent tens of billions of dollars subsidizing the IOUs, that we look at public solar power taking over. We've already, they went bankrupt 18 years ago doing it again. Also, I want to give a shout out to my nephew, Marley Eder, named after Bob Marley. He's in the international flute competition in Copenhagen, Denmark, the Nielsen competition. The first time an American made it to the semifinals and going to the finals. He's a doctorate student in flute at SC. Anyway, yeah. More excellence from the Eder family. At your service.
Thank you, Harvey.
Thank you. And I want to incorporate by reference this book, The Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warming, David Wallace Wells, the carbon and methane, the cause of over the 450 million years of the 6 extinctions on the planet, including the one we're in, and that over the last 30 years, we've put half of the fossil fuels into the atmosphere compared to all human existence.
Thank you.
Jigs up, folks.
Thank you, Harvey. Okay, Rita, you're up.
Good morning. Rita Luth, Director of Environmental Affairs for RADTEC International, and we represent the UV, EB, and LED industry. As was mentioned earlier, 1106 came to the board in 2015, October 2015, and it was voted down by the board 8-2. There was a lot of concerns back then, and I have to say this proposal is much better than what we had in 2015. So a lot of our concerns were alleviated. I had a conversation with staff yesterday. I'm optimistic that maybe we can reach a compromise, and the remaining issue appears to be, once again, the test method for the thin film materials. So wanted to give a little bit of background on that. Over 20 years ago, the EPA and the district came to RADTEC and said, you guys are the leading experts on this technology. Can you find a test method? Because our traditional methods do not work. Our technology doesn't work on evaporating VOCs, so you can't just heat the coating and measure it before and after, because by by the very definition of our reactive diluents, the product is designed to form one giant molecule and stay on the substrate without evaporation. That's where we give you emission reductions because nothing is going to the air. However, there are residuals, maybe trace chemicals from other processes, where you pick up some residual VOC, maybe in the order of 10, 20 grams per liter. But in order to get a test method approved by the ASM, which is the authority in test method development in the US, you have to come into reproducibility, and you have to reduce your error by 1%. So we're testing within that 1% because our materials themselves are about 1% VOC. So in order to overcome that, we had to do a workaround. It's not traditional and it's not perfect, but it gets you there. But the bottom line in this rule is that currently, as was mentioned, there are no emission reductions. And our coatings are at less than 50 grams per liter. The exemption that we were requesting, and I think staff is listening to us on that, is materials less than 50. So we're coming in and we're giving you voluntary emission reductions. So we look forward to continuing our work with staff, and we'll wait to see the revised language. Thank you.
Thanks, Rita. Okay, any other public comment on item 1? If not, any other business from group members here?
I just have a question. On 1111, the implementation, is that moving forward faster? Are things getting better?
Yes, I don't have the latest from the rule team, but I think, I'm trying to remember the timing here, but I do believe that even since that last was a stationary source committee meeting, there's been some more good news about availability. So I don't have the details on that.
So we got a letter yesterday or today from one of the trade groups asking for a sell-through period again.
I haven't seen that yet.
I got it last night or this morning, I forget. AHSI.
Yeah, that's the
refrigeration or whatever, something like
it's a trade association, so they're speaking for the whole. But as you heard at the board meeting, there's at least 2 that are more or less okay with the way we're headed. So
we're continuing to get.
Yeah. Well, I didn't get it, so if you have it, make sure I get a copy.
I'm sure you'll. Like I said, I got it this morning or last night.
Okay. Any other question? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a concern that has come across the supervisor's desk. I'm just wondering if it has any SCAQMD jurisdiction. It has to do with LPG vapors, and I think the community concern is more over safety and explosions than over air quality or toxic issues. But even on the air quality and toxic issues, does SCAQMD have any kind of jurisdiction over vapors from LPG tanks?
Yeah, we do have a rule on, and Naveen is going to have more details than I am. Our propane rule from a few years ago, we do have jurisdiction over like storage and transfer of propane.
Yeah.
So we passed a rule maybe 5 years ago.
5 or 6 years ago, that basically regulated or a new approach on how the valve transfers and how much of any off-gassing that may occur as a result of those valves.
In a storage facility. Okay, and is there any facility? It's the Rancho facility. Is there anything that's been grandfathered in, or is Rancho subject to?
No, we actually had set up the schedule where the largest facilities had to make that change first.
Okay.
And then trickle down to the smaller local mom-and-yard that do the barbecue.
So super dumb questions. Does that impact, I guess, how much vapor is able to be emitted? I mean, does that reduce the amount of vapor that?
Precisely. So the old design on the propane dispensers there was a gas phase.
Got it.
And every time you do any kind of transfer, that gas phase is released into the atmosphere. So the rule focused on technology that can be implemented that reduced or eliminated that gas phase depending on what is locomotive versus stationary type of storage units. I don't remember the exact emission reduction numbers, but I believe cumulatively, we were about 5 tons a day of propane emissions that were mitigated as a result of the rule, but I don't remember the exact number.
Are there stats on particular facilities that are publicly available or available to
We
board
can check
members?
the staff report, but yeah, I don't know if the staff report has a detailed breakdown of every facility.
Okay, and is there like an enforcement schedule too?
The implementation dates would be in line with the enforcement advisory or their internal implementation dates, but we can look at that.
Okay, great, I'll follow up with you, thank you.
Terrence had.
He just left, but I was gonna say, you know.
It's
if you
more
wanna
of a
give
question
us
for compliance.
Location or the facility name, we could pay some special attention to that.
Thank you.
We've
Yeah, I think
actually worked
Diane,
a
you
lot
were-
with, I'm sorry, we've actually worked a lot many years ago with some of the constituents that were really concerned about the Rancho facility. And there's lots of correspondence that I was involved with. And I do believe most of the issues are safety issues, but they do point out instances where there were leaks in school evacuations. And so we're
I guess there's some
aware of that.
correlation, the more that leaks out, the more that.
Of course. And obviously if there are odors or health impacts, then that's where we would get involved if there was a leak.
Okay, thank you so much, appreciate it.
Just one more quick thing. Sorry, I couldn't make the San Bernardino meeting last week, but I'm not on Facebook. I finally found the video, but rather circuitous. So if on the 617 page, you put it on, it doesn't require me to go through Facebook, because I'm not on Facebook, because my life is really boring.
I think one of the trade-offs of having our very quick and dirty live feed is that you'd have to go through Facebook to view it, right? I don't think.
I did find it somehow, but it was, I don't.
have to be a member of Facebook.
Yeah, right. But
Yeah, I did find it eventually. I did get to it and started to watch it.
maybe we could at least have a simple link.
Yeah, right. Well, as the program's getting staffed up, we're getting better at doing turnarounds, and that is one thing that, you know, materials, video things, and stuff like that, we're trying to do a faster turnaround time for.
Now, especially since you're working in remote facilities, I recognize the challenges, but.
So the link is up there for other meetings, but since the video is up there, if we can get that link up there.
We can do that.
I did find it, but I figured out that.
When you have 3 big meetings a month and you
Yeah,
I know.
it's like by the time you're done with one, you're starting on the next one. There's follow-up. It's been a challenge, but we're trying at least to
I
step
appreciate
up.
it. I understand.
And the staff has done an excellent job in terms of implementation of the program. So, you know, it's not a criticism, but actually I was there, but I missed like an important 5 minutes during the meeting that I want to go back and listen to, so.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get better. I said that at committee as well. It's just, the more people, we need the people to do all this work, and it's been a challenge to staff up, but we're making some progress.
Totally understand.
Okay, any other business? Okay, any additional public comment?
Yes.
Another 3 minutes, right?
Okay, I just, I gotta turn, is that my phone on maybe? Somebody else's, okay, excuse me. All right, I want to go in, I'm trying to get, I just got this stuff on the natural gas plants and they're under review. For 617, all of these plans for the local areas, 3 in the district and whatever, 10 around the state, I'm going to try to get involved to make those part of solar conversion plans. And especially in reference to transportation, Class 8 trucks, been talking to BYD and Tesla for several years and whatnot. And the equity issue and what you folks, at least staff has not evaluated. The study we did with the PUC 40 years ago, the low-income solar equity program, was the first time low-income percentage was put into any program of the state. It was OII 42, financing the solar transition, Commissioner Grimes, the first black commissioner. Anyway, so this is very important. We've gone up to 30-40%. This meeting that I referred to, a February 8th meeting with Dr. Burke. Dr. Burke said, hey, you know, I was talking about this, you know, the RAC, the Supreme Court witness. He says, you know, Pete, been listening to you for God knows how many years, and I haven't heard anybody, you come up with this and this, and I haven't heard anybody like contest what you say. So I tend to be on your side. He goes. Then he goes, he said, well, there's a paragraph here, a footnote there. And then Wayne says, wait a sec, this is for refineries. He goes, it doesn't apply to boilers, doesn't apply to other equipment. And I said, hold on. So Dr. Brick goes, okay, you can deal with Wayne. You heard something. Then he didn't contest anything else except for reclaim and boil. I said, well, you're wrong on boilers. Yeah, can you cite your material? I said, I've got stuff, you know, hundreds, thousands of pages, Department of. So got an information request, and on the I contested this, and then Dr. Brick said, okay, you can come to me. I don't want to read 800 pages, but you know, if we're ignoring this, we're ignoring the public. All right. So that's in the record. I want to get that. So they got 1,000 pages they tried to get to me. They only had June and July from 16 in drafts. They had 2 comments, same comments of stuff that we did 8 and 10, but they did not have the comment letters. I've heard there's as many as 5,000 pages. The district should have this, getting hard copies, getting into the 16 plans, and plans are required to do every 3 years. The guy that used to head modeling, it's a state law, and that should be done now. And you folks should be involved in this. Basically working, getting this back as we did several years ago to Burke, and getting it back east to Cortez and Markey for what we've been doing here. And there's actions for the state to do this as well. Green or solar New Deal. It's all in play.
Thank you, Heidi.
All right, any more general public comment? Seeing none, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. See you next week. And